Thanks for joining us on Shannons Club TV, where we revisit the histories of significant cars on Australian roads and in competition. We've received a great response to these paired histories on the Shannons Club website, where you can also catch up on previous episodes of the show.
Coming up, we'll meet a proud owner of our feature car and we'll get some expert advice from the Shannons auctions team. Right now though, let's take a look at the other Volkswagen that few people knew was built in Australia, the VW Type 3.
There were two Volkswagen models built in Australia at a time when the local Volkswagen factory became the biggest outside of Germany. The Type 3 was Volkswagen's first all-new passenger car since the Beetle, and Australia was one of the first markets to get it as an import. After a unique local Type 3 was rushed into local production in July 1963, Australian buyers generated the highest per capita Type 3 sales in the world. By 1964, increased local content shaved almost 20% off the price, making the wagon version especially attractive. It became the third biggest selling wagon in Australia at the time. Often billed as the big new Volkswagen, the Type 3 was actually built on the same wheelbase as the Beetle, on a variation of its platform chassis. Its big advances included classy new styling and extra luggage space, both a product of a totally new way of packaging its bigger air-cooled flat-4 1500 engine. Mark, the Type 3 models combined all the virtues of the Beetle with extra style, extra power and a lower centre of gravity. Now, how did that translate into competition?
Well, in local rallying here in the mid-1960s, they were outstanding performers, these cars, as seen in the 1964 Ampol trial, where they were beaten only by Harry Firth's Ford Cortina. It was outstanding. On the racetrack, though, these cars needed a serious shot of steroids, which I'll get to a bit later in the show.
Well, the Type 3's better weight distribution and new suitcase engine, located under what was the boot floor in most cars, not only boosted refinement, it improved the handling without compromising the Beetle's amazing long-distance all-road capabilities. As a bonus, the sedan and fastback versions came with a front and a rear boot. The wagon had a normal load area with a front boot, an unrivalled combination. Not only was the Type 3 a big step up in cabin refinement and luggage space for Beetle owners, it attracted new buyers to the VW fold wary of the Beetle's ageing shape. VW Australia never got the four-door Type 3 it wanted. Instead, the two-door sedan maintained a standalone semi-sporting character, reinforced by several keenly priced local twin-carb models and the unusual fastback version. The Type 3 generated such a strong following in Australia that as soon as local manufacture of the model had ended, it was soon enjoying a second life by 1969 as a locally assembled version of the current German model. Mark, on the racetrack, that would have made it a real crowd pleaser.
Yeah, it sure did, and there was one particular car that gave the term high performance a whole new meaning for VW fans. A Type 3 Volkswagen fastback would seem an unlikely weapon of choice if you were going into battle against the fastest sports sedans in Australia, unless you bolted a big fuel-injected 500 horsepower V8 into the back of it and pulled the trigger. Brian Thompson and his engineer Peter Fowler did just that in the mid-1970s, creating not only an insane-looking race car, but an instant crowd favourite that remains vivid in the minds of fans that witnessed its brief but brilliant career. Tomo's creation merged a Volkswagen road car with a McLaren Formula 5000, something like a Formula 1 car with a roof and doors. A powerful Chevrolet V8 engine and 5-speed Hewland transaxle were mounted directly behind the driver. Sophisticated suspension, huge brakes and a strong rearward weight bias gave its fat rear tyres great traction and astonishing acceleration. Joe, even though it was powered by a big Chevy V8, this car's popularity on the track must have boosted Volkswagen's brand image on the road, particularly amongst young buyers.
Well, the Type 3's day had already been and gone, especially that early body series. However, a lot of 18 and 19-year-olds had them as first cars, so just in that category, 5 or 6 years old, maybe a bit older. And to go out to Calder in a Volkswagen when everyone was driving hot Holdens and Falcons and Valiant V8s and that sort of car, you had to have a fair bit of courage.
Yeah.
And Thompson changed that overnight. You could roll up in a Volkswagen Type 3 and take your car at the car park and walk tall, and then go and watch this car it was just the most unlikely combination. And those nighttime meets, hearing those V8s thunder down the straight and see the brakes glowing red hot, it was just sensational. And you could turn up there in a Type 3 V-dub without having to be too embarrassed.
All thanks to Tomo.
Yes.
Although brilliant in concept, there were shortcomings in handling that made this homegrown hybrid a real beast to drive. However, Thompson quickly adapted his style to suit, and together they became one of the sport's biggest drawcards. His many battles with arch-rival Bob Jane in a 6-litre V8 Holden Monaro at Calder Park attracted huge crowds to the Melbourne track. The racing was so close that the inaugural Marlboro Sports Sedan Series in 1974 was not decided in Jane's favour until the final rounds. The following year, Thompson and Fowler went all out to beat Jane, gaining more power through design and development of their own aluminium heads with 4 valves per cylinder and belt-driven single overhead camshafts. Sadly, a dropped valve while leading the final round robbed Thompson of the 1975 series win he richly deserved before announcing his retirement. It was the end of a short but unforgettable era, and Australia would never see a VW Type 3 fastback go so fast again. You can read many other great road and race stories on the Shannons Club website.
My name's Andrew. I'm a member of the Volkswagen Club of Victoria, and this car is my 1969 Volkswagen Type 3. This is a family car. It's been in the family since we bought it in September 1969. With the Type 3, the 3 versions that became for sale in Australia was the notchback, the fastback and the squareback, of which this is a version of. This model particularly is an L version of the Type 3 station wagon. My father bought the luxury version or the top version. It has a few extra bits of chrome in it. The opening hopper windows in the back here that you can see, and an automatic transmission, which back in 1969 was a big thing. The car's totally original, it hasn't been repainted in any shape, form or fashion. We've garaged it. My brother and I always, as kids, always had to wipe up the car. And it's one of the reasons probably why the back sticker was noted by somebody. Been there since we bought it back in 1969. This vehicle has what they call the IRS, or independent rear suspension. It handles very, very well in curvy situations, if you're going through mountain roads and so on. It doesn't have any nasty tendencies to do anything out of the ordinary when you're pushing the car to its limits. At an early age, I started working in Volkswagen workshops, so I've grown up with a passion for the car and just of the love of the quality and the build material, and also the reliability in the car. When I go out on the road and I'm driving the car occasionally, it attracts a lot of attention. You hear a lot of Volkswagen stories, people stopping on the side of the street and share their experiences, which is a wonderful thing. It goes back to the original name of the car, Volkswagen, which means people's vehicle or people's car. It actually portrays what it really does. It'll certainly go into the future being looked after and being pampered, so yeah, I intend to keep it for as long as I can.
Shannon's National Auctions Manager Chris Borrabon joins us to talk about all things Volkswagen. Welcome to the show, mate.
Thanks, Mark.
Hi, Chris. Type 3. It's been the sleeping Volkswagen while the Beatles have been grabbing all the attention, and it's just come out, and
Absolutely.
it's being taken up by all sorts of people. What's happening?
Yeah, great resurgence in it actually. It's proving very popular amongst young people. Middle-aged people. Is some real
multi-generation.
It is. It's right, and there's great club activity in the cars.
It seems to be clicking into lifestyles. There's a travelling the continent lifestyle with roof rack.
Yep.
Going to the surf with a wagon that's dropped down to the ground and a board on the top.
Yes, that's
and
right.
there's the fastback, which is just a nice collector's car. So there's all of those factors driving it.
Yeah, there is. It's very different to a lot of other models. We're sort of seeing that, as Mark said, multi-generational getting into these cars, and it's an interesting scene. And very rarely do we see them come up on a market via auction, because most of them are changing hands amongst a club or through people who know about it.
Yeah. So what's the most popular model? Which one tends to be the most desirable?
Look, I think they've each got their own place, and I think depending on the lifestyle, depending on what they're being used for, I think they each have their own segment of a market. I mean, I love the fastbacks, I love the 1600 TSs, they're great cars. But yeah, we're seeing a variety of each of the models out there. Yeah,
because each one of them are a special car. There's nothing else like any of them. There's no wagon with a boot. No sedan with 2 boots,
that's right.
and no fastback with 2 boots, and they're quite usable. We're seeing young families in them.
Yep, correct. That's right.
And what about maintenance? When we talk about classic cars, maintaining a Volkswagen, there seems to be a lot of specialists around to look after VW owners.
Yeah, there's quite a number of specialists Australia-wide for VW, so they. In general, I think they're fairly easy to maintain and look after. I think the mechanical components are quite readily available. But yeah, there's lots of specialists out there to look after them mechanically.
And I think it depends on how close you want to keep it to the original Australian spec. You can get kits from anywhere around the world, but the Australian spec is quite unique, and you can't always restore it back to that. But I don't think the movement really cares, as long as it represents that lifestyle choice.
I think so, yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Well, thanks, Chris. Thanks for the update on the Type 3. And don't forget, if you want more news on the latest auction results, check out the Shannons Club website. If you'd like your own competition image of the VW Type 3, you'll find them all at AutoPic's incredible photo archive.
Joe, looking back at the Type 3, I mean, look, 2-door cars haven't been that popular in Australia. The Type 3 was supposed to be like the family car alternative to the Beetle, but it only had 2 doors. So why was it so successful?
That's a really interesting question, and it worried VW Australia executives crazy, but they needn't have. The loyalty to Volkswagen and what those cars could do over all Australian conditions just got people to overlook that. And I think the critical thing was that the Carmen Ghia had come out here just a couple of years earlier, and that was a beautiful looking thing. And the Type 3 looked like a more practical version of that. So it wasn't seen as a car missing 2 doors, it was seen as a Carmen Ghia coupe that you could carry people around in and your luggage. And when coming at it from that perspective, it was a knockout car, but unprecedented for a 2-door.
It's all about perspective.
Exactly right. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this unconventional air-cooled trip.
With a V8 blast along the way.
Very much so, in the VW Type 3. And we'll catch you next time on Shannons Club TV.